Hi everybody, welcome to the second episode of Kaiju and Coffee presents Geeksploitation. I'm Travis, this is Scott. Before we get started, a quick plug. Michael, Nick, and I are going to be at Monster Bash August 17th and 18th in Canton, Ohio. If you're going to be there, come on, stop by and say hey to us. But anyways, so this is Geeksploitation. If you saw the episode before this, we went through the first four video game films there in the early 90s, and we stopped on Mortal Kombat, the best of the bunch, certainly. And so I had to look up to see what we were doing for the next four for this episode. And I was actually surprised to see that it was Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I didn't forget about it, I just didn't realize that there were no other video game films between the first Mortal Kombat and this one. And so I popped it in and was watching it, and oh man, like, the first thing I thought about was I thought about that production time and how short that was. It's like what, like less than a year and a half between like releases or something like that?
It was
like less than
really
two,
quick,
certainly. And it really shows. Robin Shu, or Robin Shao, however you say his name, who played Liu Kang, he comes back, and Katana comes back, and everybody else is new. And they show off the green screen right away in the opening scene, and it's some of the worst green screening you've seen in a wide release, certainly. And so really my first thought watching it was just like, what's the rush here, man? Why did they have to cash in so quick? And we'll never know, but they kind of blew it for the idea of a third one, from what I understand, because it didn't make nearly as much. And didn't get over with fans either. Did you see this one in theaters?
No.
Oh, well, there's your... If Scott didn't see it in theaters, that should tell you how it did.
Well, so I think it was like 14.
Yeah?
Regardless. The quick production time had a lot to do with the shift in popular video games. By that point in time, when the first one came out, Mortal Kombat was still hot. By the second movie, they had to push everything because the IP wasn't as popular.
Right.
So.
I'll be honest with you. When I was a kid, I thought it was great. But that's, that shows you what I knew as a kid. I remember thinking that the the Liu Kang fight with Smoke was great. And I watched it now, and it was just... it's just that cut, frenetic pace. And I was like, oh, I guess it was just the pace that I like, because it just moves so fast. I tried to keep track at one point, and it almost seemed like it was one cut per blow delivered in the fight. I mean, almost, seriously, one for one. I couldn't believe it. And so I really was much more unimpressed as an adult. The Sub-Zero and Scorpion fight, I remember it was a big deal because that was what everybody wanted to see.
Yeah.
You could just make a whole film out of that, from what I understand, what people were interested in.
Honestly,
and, And so you finally got it, and so I remember really liking it. And something I did pick up, it's the fight choreography is very Taekwondo influenced, and that was the first martial art I studied when I was a kid, so it really won me over. But it's here and there what it is. It's just not really great. A lot of the fight scenes are just these quick little punch-ups, close-ups, fast editing. It's just not good. It's really not good. And one of the standout fights I noticed that wasn't very good was when he fought Baraka, or like 3 Barakas. It was really bad. I actually looked up and noticed that Tony Jaa did some of the stunt work for Liu Kang, and like that scene was like almost all him, or was all him. He's in like The Protector and Ong Bak and stuff like that. He's a really talented athlete and martial artist, but I didn't know that about him. But you can tell just I noticed that it suffers from what we talked about the Street Fighter film. It was like, forget a plot, forget development. Just characters. Throw them all in. Throw as many in as you can. It's like every time you turn around.
Well, that way you can sell the toys and the video game and a classic example of a movie that got rushed by the studio and pretty much and a theme that would continue with every single video game movie moving forward. It just rushed to sell toys.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Let's sell the T-shirt. Let's sell the toys. Let's sell the video game based on a video game movie.
Right. Yeah, we remember that one.
Yeah. So that's really all that was. Mortal Kombat was kind of declining in popularity at the time.
Right. It's
So
had
it
ups,
was just-
it's had ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
Because I saw some of their like 64 games. They didn't look very good.
That movie would have came around that time.
Okay.
Like post Mortal Kombat 3 into Mortal Kombat 4.
They went like 3D.
When the jump to 3D, everyone had their kind of growing pains during that time period. So it is what it is. But yeah, it was just a cash in, and that's why they didn't get any of the stars returning. That's just.
Well, yeah, I mean, the casting was just so blah. The whole thing was blah. And from the first scene he's in, the big bad, Shao Kahn, is underwhelming. Like, impressively underwhelming, which you wouldn't think that'd be a thing, but it's a thing. He's just got daddy issues. It's like, way to declaw your boss.
Yeah.
It's pretty... I don't know. There was one thing that stood out to me, that's always stood out to me. It's like a little joke that's carried over from the game. Because, we got all these more characters in there, and you got the palette swapping of the ninjas to make different ones.
Yeah.
And there's the one, his name's Rain, and his color's purple. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
I've always loved that joke. It's so stupid, but Purple Rain... You gotta love a film with Purple Rain in it, so, I mean, at least you can say that.
Yeah.
You can't say much else. It's got some of the worst CGI ever, like I said, in a wide release.
Yeah.
So I imagine...
Even early in CGI, it's bad.
Yeah.
In comparison.
Yeah, everybody talks about that. The animality scene is just so terrible.
Yeah.
Everything's been said already. There's nothing we could say about it that's gonna add anything. You've all seen it. We've seen it.
Yeah.
Too many times, more times than it deserves. But yeah, oh boy, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Not that the next film is like a big step up, because the next one is Wing Commander. It stars Freddie Prinze Jr., the killer from Scream that's not Skeet Ulrich.
Matthew Lillard.
There you go. Jürgen Prochnow, lady from Deep Blue Sea.
Mm-hmm.
The French guy from The Patriot, Kiss of the Dragon, and The Core. David Warner, who we know from Ninja Turtles 2 and Titanic and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the first image I saw of this film was a screenshot, and I saw a bald guy in the background. You couldn't see him really well, and I was like, ooh, is that Michael Ironside? It's not. He's not in it, I'm sorry to say. I was actually really disappointed by that. And I can tell by the look on Scott's face that he's now retroactively disappointed that Michael Ironside was not in 1999's Wing Commander.
Yeah.
I had to ask you about this. You knew about this film. You like this game series. I'd never heard of the game.
Yeah.
It's a computer
It's an old
game.
It's a old PC game from the early 90s.
The film came across like Space Navy. Is that what it is?
Kind of.
Okay.
It was one of the early like full motion video like games where it had the FMV sequences. I think Mark Hamill was in the third one, I believe, which got it like the biggest, to do.
I forgot he voiced a computer in it in this film.
Yeah, I'll call back to him.
My bad.
As for why this got picked up, I don't know. Maybe Starship Troopers was popular, so they were like, well, let's do that.
At any point, if Michael
maybe.
Ironside had showed up as his character in Starship Troopers, I would have immediately liked this film and recommended it to everyone I know. Yeah. But it didn't. It didn't happen. So I'm just now hearing of it, and I realize why I'm just now hearing of it.
It was not great.
It's like Space Navy. That's all it is. They're in submarines, but they're spaceships, and they're hiding from each other and using sonar in space.
Yeah, it is.
They got to be real quiet
ridiculous.
at parts because they're getting bombed in space.
Because sound travels in a vacuum, sure.
Well,
Why
you
not?
got Jürgen Prochnow from Das Boot, and he's like, he's got to be all quiet, and he's like, oh, it's just like, what am I watching? Beer Fest again? They did the same thing with him. I love Jürgen Prochnow, by the way, unless that was not clear enough.
Yeah.
But did you see this film in the theater?
No.
No.
Mm-mm.
When did you see this?
I remember seeing it on VHS back when that was still a thing.
Right.
And then like a week ago.
Well, I was gonna ask you to come clean. Did you really watch this film recently?
Yeah.
For this review?
Mm-hmm.
I gotta shake your hand, man. This guy is a good friend. This is what a good friend looks like, because this film is terrible, and I'll never ever watch it again. I think I did a little search on it real quick when I first looked it up and found we had to watch it, and it was a quote from the star, Freddie Prinze Jr., and I believe it says like he can't watch any of it because of how bad it is.
Yeah, it was real bad.
It is real bad. It's got that late 90s CGI that, we're going to rail on quite a bit, I imagine, in this series. Because these films, they're prisoners of their time.
It had hot teen stars from the time frame.
Right.
And yeah, I to this day, I don't know how that got greenlit.
It was panned. It looked like it was panned very, very viciously.
It had to be during the time period where, production companies were just buying up every video game IP they could.
Yeah.
And somehow that one got attached to somebody, and then somebody pushed it through, and then it was just garbage.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, the climax is just Freddie Prinze Jr. in a cockpit. I'm having flashbacks of, he's looking around all wide-eyed, and I'm having flashbacks of Phantom Menace from the same year. Only the special effects are way worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can imagine the budget was like, what, an eighth of something like that?
Probably. And with nowhere near the team.
I think the guy that did the music was the same guy that did the music for Godzilla 98 that Nick and I just reviewed. And I noticed something about the music. There was a cue in there that reminded me of another really bad space flop starring Jürgen Prochnow, Dune.
Yeah.
It bears no resemblance to it at all, but I did notice that the music kind of reminded me of it. And, with the dude there, 15 years later, Jürgen Prochnow again, that's all I could think about. Mm. Did you even remember that this film existed?
Yeah.
You did? Okay. I've already forgotten it on purpose. I did the mind wipe on myself. Mm. So yeah, there's really not much to say about Wing Commander. Don't go watch it. Don't look it up. It's not a good time at all. I think they tried to kill off the Scream dude at one point. He puts that cord around his neck and he saves his buddy, Freddie Prinze Jr., and he's got blood coming out of his mouth. And he's like, and they pull up his shirt and he's got a ring of blood around his shirt. And I'm like, well, that usually spells doom for a character because that's like internal bleeding. It's pretty serious, but I guess they have space medicine because he's in the climax. He's like up and walking around like nothing. But maybe that was like a little note. It's my understanding the script changed quite a bit. Probably one of the ones the actors didn't even notice because it's so shitty. Who cares? That's all I could imagine to say about this film. Is there anything else you could possibly imagine?
Like most movies, it got pushed out just because, and they hoped it would stick, and it didn't. Right.
The shotgun approach. Yeah. Throw a bunch of shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Pretty much.
And here we are scouring it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, moving on, that takes us to Lara Croft Tomb Raider from 2001. Very well-known film, as we were talking before we got started. A blockbuster film.
It did very well.
Did it? Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get to the sequel eventually, but had Angelina Jolie when she really just broke on to the scene, I think around a little after that. Then she got attached to it. If you look it up, like there's like pretty much every female actress or whatever working in Hollywood was attached to this film or considered for the role at one point. Yeah. I'm just like, I don't know. I don't believe Susan Sarandon was attached for Tomb Raider. I don't think she was considered for the role. Like, the list just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, pretty much they wanted to make the movie and it was going to happen. They just had to find someone to say yes. And, her star was rising like crazy and
I imagine
she said yes, and it gave her an even bigger boost, even though it may not have been a terribly good movie.
Yeah,
Or really have a whole lot to do with video game.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure it helped to make her a household name even more so than she already was.
Yeah.
This is a game. These are a game. I have limited exposure to it. I think I played the first level, the first couple games. Like, I think Nick beat the second game. Did you ever play them?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first 3, 4 were pretty
All
decent. Right. I mean, they weren't bad.
I kind of wasn't really into them. They're very kind of monotonous to me. It's kind of tedious. That's kind of the way the film kind of came off too. But my big takeaway from the video games was that the character, the laws of gravity and physics just do not apply to her at all. Like, I hit the jump button, and I swear she like would leave orbit and eventually come back down. And that's certainly what the filmmakers thought too, because watching it, it's just like there is a total disconnect from reality. You can't take anything serious. Everything is to the nth degree.
Yeah. Well, I think that was also a big part of why the movie was so popular. Big budget action films had taken a really big dip there around the mid 90s and into the end of the 90s, and this was one of the first to really bring that back.
Well, don't forget The Matrix, because that was definitely a big influence on it.
Clearly. Every movie that was made after The Matrix for the next 10 years was inspired, So, yeah. But again, The Matrix was probably the first big budget action film to really bring back, and then a wave of films after that.
Yeah. I completely forgot this film. I mean, I knew I watched it, and I remembered a couple of the action set pieces, stuff that was in the trailer, the bungee ballet and the robot, the guns, all that, the motorcycle, and I was just like, I was kind of dreading watching it because what I remembered, I didn't really like. 2001, man, wow, those films.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so sleek, and they're cut to all to hell, and the edits are just insane, and she's just doing stuff that I can't even.
It was really the peak of that.
Yeah. We've talked about that before, where action films they've gone through stages of where they want to be realistic, and then they want to be crazy, and they want to blow up their main character, but they survive somehow. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he'd go through an action film and have a scratch or two, but everybody behind him is dead. You just cut a swath through them all, and that's her.
Yeah, and then maybe 2 or 3 years later, you had Old Boy, a Korean film that
2 years
changed literally. It was so influential that it changed how action films were shot for the next. Even now, films are still taking inspiration from
We're
that.
still feeling the impact, certainly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a blur. The whole film is a blur. It's really hard to watch, to be honest. It took the game was heavily inspired by Indiana Jones, but this isn't. This is like Indiana Jones on steroids, man. It's crazy, and you think he gets through everything unscathed, but she's just like a whirling dervish of violence wherever she goes.
That's what was selling at the time. I mean, cut so fast you can't pay attention, so you don't know what's bad. Things like that.
They have the worst mercenaries in these films. They can't hit a thing.
Yeah.
When somebody's on a bungee cord, it means they're tied to a string, literally, and they should probably be really easy to shoot, but she wasn't. I also noticed she never shot anybody with her guns. They just look cool. The two guns and the holsters, but...
very much like the games.
Yeah. But but yeah, I really didn't get too much out of it. Daniel Craig, we had early Daniel Craig, 007 was in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody from the Resident Evil series was in it as well. That guy, he's gonna like show up and come back and show up. But yeah, there wasn't much to get out of it. She's like a female Bruce Wayne. She's got her Jeeves,
Mm-hmm.
her Alfred, her little manservants and everything.
Yeah, because she's super loaded from adventuring.
Yeah, no, I could tell by the record player she had. It was like made of crystal or some shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Lara Croft Tomb Raider. It did get a sequel, and much like we had to have a quick turnaround on Mortal Kombat, we'll have a quick turnaround on that too, because it's going to be on the next episode.
Yeah.
That's another one, like, I guess we shouldn't get too into it, but I mean, I remember it, but I also remember, like, not wanting to remember it too. But that's a story for another day. Anything else you have to add about Lara Croft Tomb Raider?
Not really. I mean, we really covered it. So.
I mean, she's pulled by sled dogs on her feet, man.
Yeah. It's a dumb action film.
They have treads. She'd get dragged on her
Mhm.
face. Oh, well. You can't add too much logic to these types of films. But
No, I mean, literally, this movie came out in the peak of that time period. Like, it was just...
yeah, that over-the-top action is just
something
too
that's...
over-the-top.
Yeah, it's
hard to pay attention to after a certain point. I mean, which brings us to our next film. This is kind of a rarity for me because we're getting to a film that's based on a game series that I've actually not just played but got into. Resident Evil. I don't know that I barely saw a PlayStation for a long time because everybody I knew had 64s, but then come 98, these advertisements for this film called Resident Evil 2 started hitting, and you're like mowing down zombies and creatures and monsters with like machine guns and shotguns, and when you're a kid that grew up on John Carpenter films and George Romero films, you're like, yeah, that I'll take that, please.
Yeah.
I knew somebody that rented a PlayStation because people did that at the time. Do they still do rent game consoles?
I don't think so.
Well, they used to, and
Yeah.
I knew somebody that rented a PlayStation, so I was able to rent Resident Evil 2, and nothing was ever seen the same again. Like I was really impressed. It was grimy and dirty, and it was like a horror film that you got to play. I think growing up in the 90s, it was pretty common to see groups of kids around a game and they're playing and they're all watching. But
Yeah.
this was the first time that I noticed that, like, you'd see that, and then the people that were watching, they would be as into it as the person playing.
Yeah.
You're Sonic, you're just running around. There's a story. Mario's got a story, but you're just running around and go to the next stage.
Yeah.
But this was the first time I realized it was introduced to me. I'm not saying it was the first time, but I realized, these games can tell us stories, and I'm not trying to say it's like Faulkner or Steinbeck or Spielberg or anything, but when you're into science fiction horror, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Or I certainly thought so. I was highly impressed.
Yeah. I would say around that time period, especially with the advent of the PlayStation, the Saturn and stuff like that, when CD-based games could give you more than what the previous generations had, you could really start focusing more on storytelling, and
Right.
and that was a prime example. I mean, not that you kind of couldn't before, but I think especially with like RPGs and such, but it was definitely a time period in which video games grew a lot as a medium, and this film really was a part of that, I'd say, honestly.
Yeah, because 4 years later, there comes the film. We had heard about it for years.
It'd been on the table for like in magazines and online and just everywhere. So much buzz that a movie was going to get made, then it wasn't going to get made, then it was going to get made. Want to say even as early as like the first copies of Resident Evil 2 came with like a contest in the instruction manual to be in the movie.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well,
of which I doubt anyone was, because it came out like 4 years later.
Well, I mean, the film, to get to the film, I mentioned George A. Romero films just now. It blows my mind to this day that he was initially attached to direct it. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
No.
He left over creative differences, and that doesn't surprise me. That dude, he was fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like, he had some fucking crazy-ass ideas. I've seen early spec scripts of his projects and what they became, and it's just like, that dude was out of his fucking mind.
Yeah.
But that's why we're talking about him right now. He's certainly the father of the modern zombie, as they call him, and he directed the Japanese commercials for Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
So it was a perfect fit. I've seen those, and it looks like the game come to life. Not like maybe there's an alternate universe where he did a film that is the game come to life. But
those first 3 games were so based on his work.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't until, let's say, Resident Evil 4 where things drastically changed in world.
Right.
But, it's hard to turn down the person who really inspired everything that the game is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why it was such a big deal. And then here comes the film.
Yeah.
This is, I guess, the first one of this series that I can say I saw it in the theater. I saw Resident Evil in the theater. Did you see that as well?
Yeah.
Certainly. Like, we're total marks. They got us. Initially, I liked it. I know I say that a lot. That's because I was a knucklehead. But I was like, well, it's called Resident Evil. I guess I like it. And then later on, I was trying to think of like what about it I liked, and I realized that I really didn't like it. What were your initial reactions?
Liked it when I saw the theater, liked it when I left the theater, and I still like it now.
You still like it now?
It's not, a movie masterpiece by any means, but it is a fun movie. It gets you from A to B adequately.
Well, we talk about the periods, the time periods that these films came out a lot, and certainly with this one, I really feel like this is just an early 2000s action film called Resident Evil, because it's just sleek and it's very...
That's exactly what it is.
The editing's the same thing, but I just expected more from it.
In what way?
Well, I wanted a Resident Evil film.
In what way?
Well, I think they could have done a loose adaptation like they did, and stayed more true to the source material. Because you picture these early games, and they're like murder scenes, pixelated murder scenes, but
movies that you couldn't get into a theater without an X rating.
Well, it was rated R.
Mm-hmm.
But they still had to cover up Mila Jovovich because they didn't want the NC-17, even though she does have nude scenes. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was, it is what it is. But that's why I was like, was it R? No, it is.
Yeah, it's an R-rated film.
There are a number of scenes in it that are very Resident Evil. When she gets to the kennel and the gates are busted open and they're like bloody. And all the doors are hanging open, and so that's very Resident Evil to find that. Yeah. When there's a close up of the monster and it's got like tubes coming into him and it's feeding him and he's growing and being sustained in that chamber, that was very Resident Evil as well. When they go down into whenever you got to go to a sub basement, they're like a mile underground. There's still a sub basement, so they had to do that. And I kind of felt like that could have been the film. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. It was basically, like, it's hard for me to separate the Resident Evil franchise, we'll get into this, but from the Underworld franchise and a little bit of the Tomb Raider franchise. They're like, well, we just want skimpily clad women with double pistols doing the thing. She doesn't go double pistol yet in the first one. You gotta wait for that.
They created a new character.
Yeah.
And a lot of what went, especially the first movie, a lot of what went into that would even later influenced the game series itself.
Mm-hmm. In a good way?
In more of a Easter eggy kind of way. But yes, I mean, not negatively affect it, but especially with the first movie, it was a good movie. People just had different expectations for what it should have been. Because to be perfectly honest, it seems as though with every movie that's a video game, first, people want a shot-for-shot remake of the game.
Right.
Just play the game then. Don't watch a movie where somebody's trying to take a different direction artistically.
Right.
And this is one of the very few movies that tried, I felt, succeeded.
Well, we should mention that it's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. We've reviewed his work previously in Mortal Kombat. This is his second video game film. Stars Mila Jovovich and Michelle Rodriguez and some other people. I don't know, man. Like, it's so bleak and dark. And like the industrial lighting, there's such a nice shot of a setting sun early on in the film, and it's like, say goodbye to that, because now we're just gonna be this industrial lit zombie flick. It's gonna take it's certainly
you're in a building a mile under, half a mile underground.
Right.
I'm not sure what more you expected.
Well, I didn't want to go underground myself, but
all the games did.
It definitely has a claustrophobic element in the elevator scene in the beginning, where the computer fucks with those people. It could have killed them right away, but it's like, nah, I'm gonna mess with you first.
Yeah.
And with the black light emergency lighting, I don't know. It's just weird. I don't know.
And I again, with this particular movie, people just had different expectations on what it should have been, instead of looking at it like it's its own thing. But granted, later films in the series are terrible. Are just awful, awful movies. But at least the first one tried to do something different while remaining in the same world. Right. And I feel, still to this day, that it at least succeeded in trying something new, and it wasn't terrible.
Right.
You just have to separate a little bit from the games, which are already cinematic in and of themselves. I mean, it's like a little 2.5, 3 hour movie you're playing interactively.
That's really what I liked about it.
Yeah.
But it was a horror film cinematic experience. But you didn't get that from the film. You can see where there's kind of a disconnect there, right? Where it's source material draws from horror films, but then the film is more of an action film.
Action thriller. But those were what was popular at that time in theaters. In addition to, that's what the games themselves would become.
Right.
Even just shortly after this, they were probably already working on Resident Evil 4. When this movie came out. And Code Veronica was very much the same.
Right.
A precursor to that. It's where they were heading with the games in general, so it wasn't that big of a leap, honestly.
I blame The Matrix.
Well,
everything on damn Keanu Reeves and The Matrix. Did you pick up on the Mortal Kombat references?
I did.
I never did until watching it this time. Mila Jovovich, she's starting to learn that she's a badass. She breaks a zombie's neck with her legs, with her thighs, just like Sonya Blade does with her fatality of Kano. And then just a couple seconds at most after that, somebody just, get over here! I was like, I got that, Paul W.S. Anderson. Don't think I didn't. I caught that, sir. So you enjoyed it, yeah. One of my earliest gripes, and to this day is still this gripes, you've heard me complain about this. The big deal about the Resident Evil games was the boss.
Yeah. And
I felt that the boss in this one was absent. We had an absentee boss. Because you did get a monster. I know you got a monster. Yeah. But, it wasn't a boss. So I was like, I don't know. I don't like it. You didn't pass the test. What kind of Resident Evil doesn't have a boss?
The first one.
No, that a tyrant. It's a boss.
Yeah, same thing as this.
No, the liquor's not a boss. It's 2 shotgun blasts and it's dead.
At the end. The guy at the end.
The guy at the end.
Yeah.
No, I mean like the big bad, the thing you have to fight and beat
Yeah.
to beat the
Yep,
game.
whatever.
There's no boss in Resident Evil, unfortunately. Scott here, he just likes Mila Jovovich. And as we all do, she is a talented actress. Even though she starts phoning it in as these film series go on. And I'm thinking we should tackle the rest of the Resident Evil films in the next episode just to get them out of the way. Because we had already discussed it, but the viewers don't know. But we're actually going to do a special episode just on the Resident Evil franchise. Because how many films is it now? 7, 8?
I want to say 7. 7 sounds right.
That's double any other video game franchise, right?
Triple even.
Yeah.
I don't think any video game franchise has gotten out of just a sequel.
A sequel territory, right?
Yeah.
When all the next wave of reboots start around, then we'll see.
Oh, of course.
Because I think all these are probably scheduled for reboots except for like Wing Commander, probably.
Yeah, hey, you never know.
So yeah, I mean that's Resident Evil. Is there anything else you had to say about this one?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Kaiju and Coffee presents Geeksploitation.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time. Peace.